A pattern I see really often in relationships between men and women are men being really curious, having great banter, and asking a lot of great questions in the beginning phases of the relationship or during courtship, and then kind of losing that curiosity and failing to become an expert in their partner in the relationship in the long term. Of course, this can happen with anybody across genders, but I find it really particular and specific to men because I think it has a lot to do with the way that men are socialized to attract and obtain women partners. I think it's called a talking phase for a reason because across the internet and across pickup books and across the world, right, the concept of good banter is a well-known way to get women if you're a man. And so I think men often perceive this high-level curiosity, this really engaging conversation, these really interesting questions as a sort of plume, a distinguishable feather that separates them, differentiates them from the other men they're in competition with, and allows them to stay interesting long enough to get the girl. But oftentimes something weird happens where this curiosity, these really interesting questions, those hours-long phone conversations, or being able to sit at a table and talk until the restaurant closes, these characteristics and qualities of the beginning relationship don't transfer into the matured relationship or the long-term committed relationship. Dr. Stan Tatkin talks about how one of the best ways to have a successful partnership that lasts the distance, right, that makes it, is to become an expert in your partner. And a really redundant experience that I hear from women time and time again, over and over again, is that they end up in relationships, even full-blown marriages, where they feel like their husband doesn't know them at all. There will be these seemingly micro incidents where the husband comes home with a chocolate cake or a bouquet of roses and the wife hates roses, she loves peonies, or she hasn't been able to eat chocolate for years due to something going on with her teeth, whatever the case may be. And these moments seem really small and insignificant, but in the grand context of what we're all yearning for, right? To be seen, heard, and valued, to be held in consideration, these are really make or break moments for a relationship in terms of trust. I think it's really difficult because the way that men are socialized to behave to get a woman oftentimes don't come with a long-term strategy or a long-term, investment in those actions and behaviors, which makes sense. And so even if there is a lot of information being exchanged in the talking phase, I think it's really difficult because men are so focused on asking good questions and facilitating good banter that they may not actually be internalizing, storing, and retaining the information for future use. And I want to say very clearly, right, this is an issue in the ways that men specifically are socialized to engage with women in terms of getting them, keeping them, and then being with them. And I think this shows up in a different way. That frustration or that feeling of disconnection on men's side shows up in ways where maybe his wife's interests have changed or her tastes have changed in something. And when he learns that, or when he hears that, he says something like, "But you love San Diego." And instead of being curious with her, engaging why she's changed her mind about it or why she doesn't love it, it suddenly creates a deep sense of insecurity and fear, which I think boils down to a recognition in some way, shape, or form that you're not actually that in tune with your relationship and your partner, and that endangers everybody. And when this happens, people tend to square off. That's how we end up in the conversation. "Well, you don't pay attention to me. Well, you're not as fun as you used to be," and any iteration of that beyond. And when we square off with our partners, regardless of gender, but especially in gender dynamics between men and women, we're forced to flatten them and reduce ourselves. We end up operating from this very small place. If we're on the defense, I'm small, I'm not good enough, I'm doing everything wrong, I'm going to be punished, I'm going to be hurt, I'm going to be injured, or I'm insignificant, I'm not worth paying attention to, I'm not valued. And then we have to flatten the other person out into another. Not a whole person with a complex set of needs, wants, and desires, not a person trying to get those needs met, but an enemy, and then we're going to war. The thing I love about the concept of an ongoing relationship with becoming an expert in your partner is it keeps everybody human. I know the concepts of deconstructing belief systems and masculinity and patriarchy and things like that can seem really complex, and one of the best antidotes to that from a research perspective and from an interpersonal relational perspective is humanizing the people nearest to you. When we make it our business to create and cultivate an ongoing sense of curiosity towards another person, we allow them to be distant from us. The analogy that I always use is when you hold something up too close, you can't really see it, right? You're not able to get as much detail. But when you hold it at an appropriate distance, you're able to take in the nuances of it. You're able to take in the shape, the form, the shifts, and the changes and observe it. And when we're in a place of observation, we're naturally less defensive. We're more receptive and adaptable to change. And we're able to find the shifts and the tumultuous nature of other people in their wholeness to be interesting and fascinating, not so threatening. There's also a natural, very human sense of reward when we get it right. When we're able to become experts in our partners, we're able to work to a place where we can get it right most of the time. And so when we get it right, it feels good. But also when we get it wrong, we've built up an ongoing relational grace. And so that means when you make a mistake, they have more grace and forgiveness towards you, and you have more grace and forgiveness towards yourself. I think if more people thought this way, not just in romantic relationships, but in relationships in general, we would be so much better off as a culture, as a society, as a world. A relationship is essentially something made up, right? You can't see it. We're building it together. We're building it together around a shared set of beliefs, of dreams, of wants, of hopes. And we're choosing a person, not a bunch of ideas, not a flat panel that we've projected our own wants, needs, desires, and fears onto. We have one job when we're being ourselves, which is to get to know ourselves and to be ourselves, hopefully make it less painful for the rest of our lives. And so we pick somebody else, we sign up to be doing that for them as well. We sign up to essentially be saying, hey, I'm going to get to know you in all your iterations, shapes, and forms for the rest of your life. Which means people will change, people will shift, people will surprise and delight us, people will confuse and disorient us, as we will to ourselves. I think the question and the challenge is, how do we stay interested? How do we stay connected to the wholeness of a person instead of flattening them, reducing them, and turning them into an other that we essentially just defend against? A really difficult thing about relationships is we often pick people that match our wounding, right? The bite fits the wound. But there's also a lot of really great potential for healing in that. When we truly start to understand how someone ticks, what they like, what they don't like, how they want to be spoken to, what gets them to work in conflict. It's almost like we get a rosebud, semicolon, exclamation point, like a cheat code into getting that person to be the best version of themselves. I think squaring off and going to war and battling is how we've watched generations of our parents, their parents navigate relationship and conflict. But when you become an expert in your partner, you can convince, you can negotiate, you can seduce, you can use humor, you can have fun and figure things out and work together as a team where everybody feels honored, respected, cared for. And I think that's the reason that we partner in the first place.